Welcome to Evolved Radio, where we explore the evolution of business and technology. Today on the podcast, I'm talking to Piers Steele, professor at the University of Calgary and author of The Procrastination Equation. Piers has spent years researching the reasons and impacts of procrastination. Today, we chat about the reasons why you fail to follow through despite best intentions. It's a surprisingly complex topic. This is a fascinating, mixed conversation on self-help, psychology, biology, and productivity. I'm sure you'll find the conversation as fascinating as I did. Enjoy. If you enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast from. Also, be sure to check out the webpage, evolvedmgmt.com/podcast for show notes, links to my guests, and to check out previous episodes. Now let's get started. And welcome, Piers. Before we started recording, we were talking about different productivity methodologies and GTD and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Covey. And you have some thoughts on that if you want to start there.
It's based on his dissertation that was in Brigham Young. And it was actually, what he was trying to do is look for crossovers between religious advice and more established kind of self-regulatory advice. But this was way back in the 1970s, right? But actually, you can download the dissertation. It's available online. And he cites actually surprising a lot of the same people who are my advisors, the people who trained me from University of Minnesota. So it was kind of really interesting, but it also kind of reflects the time. I mean, this is, psychology, our understanding of motivation, self-regulation has moved forward so much in the last 40 years. That, I wouldn't say it's bad advice. It's just preliminary advice. So when we're talking about the 7 habits, and one of the ones was, do first things first, right? That's not really a cure for people who procrastinate. It's like, gee, thank you. People know they have trouble getting this done. They know they should be doing it first. They don't. And it's equivalent basically to saying somebody who's depressed, be happy.
Right.
And, well, gee, you're going to roll now. Start curing the rest of the world. So you know what? You know the problem with famine? Not enough food.
Here we go. Now we're solving the world's problems.
Boom. I am people should just listen to me. That's having a little fun with it. I think it's an interesting, and the 7, it was really the first one. I mean, they're all over the place now, top 10 lists and top 5 reasons. But Stephen Covey was really the first one to kind of, what's called intellectual arbitrage, which is just a fancy way of saying taking something from science and making it popular,
sure.
Something more digestible. And Malcolm Gladwell is famous for that.
Right.
He's almost famous for getting it kind of half right, which he absolves himself of by saying, well, they're just conversation starters,
right.
Even if people believe everything I say. So he just pushes, I'll take the money, but not the responsibility.
So the example of the 10,000 hours, and even the author of the study that comes from says, well, that's not exactly what it means, right?
That's right. And even a friend of mine, Fred Oswald, who was on a paper where she actually looked about how much does this really change, and how much does it really create expertise? And they said, well, you need it, but there's no guarantee. There's lots of musicians out there, for example, who've put in their 10,000 hours, and, there's very few of them that become superstars.
Right.
So, there's no guarantees, but that's what we like. We like to have these recipes, of success. You do A, B, and C, and you'll get the results you want. Certainly, I think they increase the chances that you get them, but they're portrayed as guarantees. That's why I think, a little stoicism doesn't hurt in life, that you really can't guarantee a lot of these outcomes.
Sure.
So you've got to prepare yourself for being okay with things not happening exactly as you choose.
And you had said just a second ago that Covey sort of it being early stages for those sharing those ideas. Do you think it is a change of the times, that there was maybe a little less self-reflection in the 40s and 50s? Like you had to be more hardened, and that period was just opening up on the idea of you should reflect on yourself more and carrying those ideas forward. Is that part of it, you think?
Yeah. I mean, there's been a long line of self. I mean, even Benjamin Franklin wrote a book about self-help. And then you go all back to Napoleon Hill. And so this idea, it's yeah, I think it's really kind of the idea of self-improvement and self-actualization instead of just being who you are. And like, it's kind of a change in culture where beforehand you had your station in life.
Right.
And it was, now we can be anything. You can go from people having, these success stories. They're great. But they're oversold too. Mm-hmm. So if things don't go your way, that's always going to be your fault.
Right.
And it's not exactly true either. Right. So, people don't like that nuance. They like things to be very simple and forward. And they like this idea of bad things happen to bad people, not bad things happen to good and bad people. In fact, some of the reasons that failure happens often for the same reasons to bad people as it happens to good people. You can't be, there's no cartoon characters out there who succeed without being aware of like the real exigencies, the politics, the problems of life, and dealing with it in a rational manner. Now, part of this package of success, though, is going to be your motivation. So it's helpful. It's helpful to kind of get your stuff together and to do all these particular elements that will help you get stuff done, and it can make a difference. I mean, I often liken it to you're playing poker, and I'll let you take one card out of your hand and replace it with any card you want. And you think, wow, it's amazing, right? That still doesn't guarantee you're going to win.
Right.
But it's certainly, I'd rather have that than, just being able to basically just have the 5 I'm dealt with. So, and if you think about, there's multiple factors that determine whether you're going or well, and one of them is your own motivation. That's a useful thing to have. Of course, there's times when, you're trying to start a business and the economy goes really down, right? Or you start off something and all of a sudden it becomes automated, or, you become sick, or you love, and this also life is happening to us. But even having said that, that's a lot of caveats there. Having said that, you should still want to take that one card out of your hand and replace it with something better. And that's what a lot of these things are doing. So, and the idea, we're building on each other's work. 7 Habits, it's a great piece for its time. Right now, it's the Franklin Covey just markets the hell out of it. So marketing counts. But if you actually kind of look, there's a lot better advice than what's contained in that. Mm-hmm. You can even talk about, get things done, which I think has a lot of good elements. I think it's incomplete, but I think there's a reason why people follow it. And there's a lot of good elements. Like we can deconstruct that too, and talk about, what works and what doesn't. But for the most part, people are they're uninformed of their own operating manual.
Right. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So they don't really know when, they want to, people want to get stuff done. They want to get the motivation they have before deadlines earlier. They just don't know how to evoke it. Mm-hmm. And some of these things get closer to the conditions which will give you motivation and help you have an easier life. There's so many times you might think if only start an hour earlier, a day earlier, what a difference that can make. And it's true.
Yeah.
It's and so sometimes small changes will have a significant difference in your quality of life. And that modest outcome is what I'm selling as a psychologist and a professor and somebody who's tenured and doesn't really have to worry about having to promote everything all the time in this hyper-mediaized world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's important because what I liked about there's sort of several things I liked about what I was reading from the material that you were producing and the comments that I saw you making about the topic of procrastination is so much of it is kind of a crossover on the some of those self-help things and the deeper psychology of why are you procrastinating. And I think people tend to look for tactics to overcome what they think are sort of failures in system, but it's in a lot of ways it's much more about the motivations. There's some touches on depression and external locus, those types of ideas that are a lot more relevant to that. And I like the idea that procrastination is an indication of something probably much deeper. It requires a little bit more exploration, and why individual habits or tactics will have better results for people versus others because the reasons are probably much more individual, right?
Yeah. And it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks the same in the fact that you didn't start it when you meant to. And actually, that's what we kind of define procrastination, is putting off despite expecting to be worse off. So this is from your own standards. So somebody else might say, you should do that now. And you said, no, I'm totally comfortable with doing that later. And you might be 100% right. So it's by your own standards. But at some point, you might say to yourself, I want to get this done. I should get this done. I'd be better off if I got this done and started it now. And yet you don't. And for no particular reason, then you didn't find the will within inside you. And that's procrastination.
Yeah.
Of course, that's why bad things happen, because it's by your own standards. I mean, that's why people who procrastinate tend to be less healthy, less wealthy, less happy, because you can think about the most important thing in your life, that if you did not address this, it'd be disastrous. And there are people who are in the same situation and not addressing it.
Right. And that was the quote that I read that really tweaked my interest, was you described procrastination as a form of self-harm.
Yeah.
You go a little deeper on that, because I thought that was a sort of an evocative and quite profound thing to put on procrastination.
Well, it's considered a subset of irrational behaviors, which interesting enough, economists don't even believe exist. They don't believe people can ever be irrational. So, but it's where you knowingly do something that's against your own self-interest. And in order for that to happen, there actually has to be more than one actually you inside your head. And some people call this a dualistic, or the theory of the mind, and some people the limbic system versus the prefrontal cortex. And there's actually like analogies of this going all the way back to Plato. We talked about the mind being about two horses. But, when we actually put people in fMRI machines and see it, we actually see that there's two different seats of decision making. And one is this earlier limbic system, which really is kind of close to your amygdala, which is the source of your strong emotions. And it wants things with a capital W. It feels things strongly. That's where your cravings come from. And then you have this great kind of neocortex, living meaning new bark, it built on top of the limbic system. And some people call this a kludge, which is kind of a sloppy design. And it's great for thinking about the future. Abstract thoughts. What are you going to do next weekend? Next weekend isn't here. Well, next weekend, I'm going to get up early. I'm going to call my mother and I go exercise. I'm going to do all these virtuous things. But next weekend comes around. And now I'm really in a real bed at this point, and I'm feeling really comfortable, and I can really turn off or put the snooze button, and I can change my mind. And that's a limbic system trumping basically your plans from the prefrontal cortex. And there's certain things which makes this trumping a little bit easier to happen, and some things that make it harder, and it seems to do with your environment and your energy levels and where you are and what you've got to do. And you can arrange things so it's more likely you're going to follow through, sometimes way more likely. And if you don't, it's just basically, it's almost, psychophysics. If when you drop a rock off a building, it's going to fall. There's no wrong or right about it. If you don't arrange your life so your motivations are in line with what you want to do, certain outcomes will happen, and it just does. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't even make you lazy necessarily. Lazy people never intended to do it in the first place. It just makes you struggling with the vagaries of life. And actually, in a lot of cases, it's the most normal thing to do is to put it off. It makes you, I would say, human.
Right.
You're counting your humanity, that you're a member of the human species. That's about it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. That sort of the idea that so much of this is us placing expectations on ourselves, and that's where sort of the anxiety and sort of the self-loathing comes from. Is not necessarily the decision, but the management of our own expectations. That's really is that sort of the self-flagellation involved in that? That, like you said, the lazy person never intended to do that. You're one step above and at least wanting to improve yourself and not procrastinate or do things better, but you just struggle with the action of that, right?
Yeah, Tim Pitchell, who also does a lot of procrastination research, he always kind of really emphasizes that we should start with self-forgiveness. A lot of people, when they procrastinate, there'd be a certain amount of people, unfortunately, who, when they heard this was about procrastination, wouldn't be able to even listen to it. Their guilt with being so great, and reminded them, even though I forgive you, you should forgive yourself. If you got it this far, right? Good for you. But it is something that you have to forgive yourself with, because when people find such have such an emotional reaction to it. Like it's an indicator of their identity, and they want things, and they feel shame for giving in. It stops them from actually taking positive, productive subsequent steps to deal with it. Like, for example, when people try and quit smoking, they said it takes about 7 times, right? So the first few failures, that's normal, right? And you learn from them and you get a little closer until eventually you get, after finding all the tricks and habits that have been leading you down, you learn from it and you get to where you need to be. But you need a plan. You need some strategies that will work for you. And actually, depending upon you who are, this is what I cataloged in my book, the procrastination equation. There was about 23 of them. There's other ones, but there were actually even more than that. But they weren't scientifically vetted. And I made that as my rule. They had to be tested, proven, they had to work. And then it's simply a question of matching the right technique to the right person, and which is a bit of a challenge at times, and then seeing them implement it correctly, which is also a challenge. But if you can get the right technique to the right person and have them implement it correctly, it works. But those are 2 big steps.
And the tactics that you lay out there, the book helps people sort of self-assess on potentially areas that they're going to struggle with. And
I put in a diagnostic.
Right. And does the diagnostic match with particular tactics that will support those failings, or? Yes,
they do. Well, okay. It gets you down into classes or categories of tactics. I would say the ones that typically work almost always for everybody, and ones that dealing with people's impulsiveness or sensitivity to time. We tend to all to have too much of that. So, it's just a trait of humanity that we have difficulty getting motivation for projects that happen way into the future and the consequences that happen in the future. That's why, surprise, we feel most of our motivation just before the deadline when the consequences are short. That's not always convenient.
Yeah.
But people trying to make do. And sometimes, you think about the amount of productive power we have in the 11th hour. It's it's amazing what we could do. Some people I've described as superhuman. But it doesn't always work. You can't always recover the error of not starting on time. Sometimes you have multiple projects. Sometimes it's bigger than you think it's going to be. Sometimes other responsibilities happen, and not to mention the stress and worry of all that and the sleepless nights. And so when you ask people, sometimes you have this funny things. People say, no, I've got to figure it out. I work best just before the deadline.
Yeah.
And I say it like it's a choice. Like, I choose to work before the deadline because that's where I have the most energy. And I say, oh, great. So you could work earlier with the same energy if you wanted to. And no, I know I can't. So it's not really a choice. And then I say, if we could give you some of that same energy earlier, would you want it? And said, of course, right? So basically, here's the problem: is that people, when start too early, it's like drinking from an eyedropper. And when it's just before the deadline, it's drinking from a fire hose. And really, how do you want your motivation? Like the same way you want your drinks, like in glass form, enough, right?
Sip at a time.
That's good. I have enough to do this. Yeah. And we don't usually have it at that particular point. And there's a variety of reasons. Some of it's who we are. A lot of it's where we are. We've reached actually epidemic. 500% increase, 600% increase in chronic procrastination over the last 30 years, since about 40 years since the 1970s. And reason has a lot to do with the environment which we work in. Mm-hmm. And the better temptations, the more easily available, the more likely we're going to procrastinate. And it's it's very difficult to do work in the middle of a party.
Right.
I'm going to bring that's right.
And now with social media, there's a constant party perceptibly around us, right?
And it's amazing how bad it is. In essence, there was always a lot of content. And actually, we track this through history. It was kind of neat when they talked about the allure of the silver screen causing people to procrastinate as they left their offices to sneak but they had to leave they had to go to a locale and pay money for it.
Right.
And it was only what was available, it was showing. So nowadays, almost instantly, we have every video and clip, and it's not that they're available. They've also being algorithmically selected for you
Right.
to be the most tempting, which is, no time, we're not built for this level of temptation. Simply aren't. That where we have this level of these AI-driven algorithms. AI, which I understood that it self-taught itself, these algorithms, like Google's AlphaGo, how to beat not only the Go player, but the previous most expertly constructed human chess algorithm, right? That we actually built with all of our, teraflops trying to solve it. It beat it by teaching itself chess in 14 hours.
Yeah.
From nothing. And you think you're going to be able to kind of outsmart this? No. If you're exposed to any type of social media, it'll be something you really, really want to see, and it's going to lure you away from work.
Yeah,
because they're that good.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you about that, whether or not sort of the panic and the concern around the impact of social media and the devices and things like that, whether or not that was legitimate. And I guess you're saying it is, but I kind of wondered if it was the same idea of like people being less personal, and then they contrast everyone staring at their smartphone with the old timey pictures of everyone on the train staring at their newspaper. Like, is it just sort of and you mentioned like having to go to the silver screen, and the movie theater being the death of public interaction and things like that, but people used to be concerned about books, saying people wouldn't interact with each other and stuff.
Concerned about the family just sitting down and watching a television show, right, and not interacting. And I said, wow, that would be pretty incredible if I could everyone in one place watching the same show. That would be like success. We used to think that was the death. I mean, our standards have changed a little bit, but it's in Silicon Valley, where they produce this, they see it as something that we, as the common people, should consume, not them.
Right.
They consider it on the scale from candy to crack. They describe it as closer to crack. They want to make it as addictive as possible, and they're really successful at that. And they go by the rule of not letting their own children consume the devices they themselves create. Like Steve Jobs never let his children have any of the iPads or iPhones. And they go by the rule that the last one in their class which gets a phone wins. So are we the chumps, right? We just here's the problem with it. It's that some of it is great. I mean, there's some social media consumption is fantastic. I mean, I wouldn't want to live a life without chocolate, right? Or having a glass of wine. But having 2 bottles of wine, that's a bad idea.
Every day.
Yeah. Every day. Or, an extra large Toblerone. And yet, occasionally we find ourselves slipping into this. And with social media, it's a problem not of it existing, the problem's designed for us to overconsume it. It's like we're in a little bit of an inescapable cage of temptation. We're living in a candy store that we cannot get out. And people are saying, well, it's your fault for eating too much candy, right? Even though you live in a candy store.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's got a lot to do with the environment. So, I mean, we're slowly getting tools out to constrain or basically kind of make it a little bit harder to get. And there's a lot of simple things you can do. Remember, we are very susceptible to how close rewards are. So they found out even if they could put like a 10-second delay on people's access to social media, they used it half as much.
Right.
It was the instantaneousness of it, not necessarily the size of the reward. Or some people did that old one where they grayscale their phone, so it's not just as visually as appealing, and that they just didn't feel like doing it anymore.
Right.
So you think about our enjoyment we get from these, and when we're doing them, we're doing something that gives you just a little trickle of dopamine, just a little tap of it, but it's quick. We love quick. We love the speed of which a reward comes has an exponential effect on how tempting it is. So if you can get to something in a few seconds, really tempting, but you only have to delay it to like 15 seconds or so for it to drop off really, really steeply. That's the exact opposite world we live in, right? They want to have it instantly available, and which makes it very difficult for us to take rational use of it. So we find ourselves doing these games on our phones and sets that aren't, we can acknowledge that really perhaps they're not as fun as we kind of want them to be, but they're better than the work that we have to do.
Yeah.
And so, and you actually get this even problem with emails, right? People spending all their time in emails, that quick.
Yep.
Reward.
Someone wants me. Right?
That's right. Or it's people liken it to like pulling of a slot machine. What could it be?
Yeah.
What could it be? What can we go? Oh, it's nothing.
Yeah, info roulette
Maybe
again.
The next one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good one. It's one of the sort of, again, like the tactics and giving some some tools to deal with this. The first thing that I tell people around productivity is turn off the email toaster. Right,
That's right. It is.
When the Outlook push attracts your attention, like interrupts you or whatever you're doing with this little tease of like, you have an email. Here's the first subject line. Would you like to come read this? Like, it's so distracting and it's really unnecessary.
And I like you bringing up a lot of, for historically, you can think about all these different lines of book, but as they evolve, we convert, right? There's a truth to who we are. There's a truth to the situation we're in. And consequently, a lot of our attempts are sincere. They might kind of start from different starting places, but the more we learn about them, the more we start saying, hey, we really can't handle obvious temptations constantly interrupting our sense of concentration. In fact, I heard it takes about 15 minutes from after using an email to get back to your fully concentrated state. And within that 15 minutes, you probably get another email. So you never get to that place.
The task switching tax is what I've heard it referred to.
Yeah. Switching task is tasking.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go. They're a little rhyming for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we try and create conditions which create flow states. There's other ones. Everyone knows about SMART goals, even though it's from a 1982 Greg Dorn newsletter. And he got, again, like a good early attempt. He got about, I'd say a good 60% right. It was kind of, it's a little bit, he was actually talking about how to organize teams, not individuals. And it was just his own experience. We could refine that a little bit more, but what we simply have done, us as a profession, is almost reverse engineer naturally occurring deadline.
Right.
So where do you find you have most motivation? Just before deadline. Okay, let's see if we can go to a naturally occurring one. Let's see if we can get an artificial one. Artificial diamonds, for example, are detected because they're better than naturally occurring ones. They have more perfect carbon lattice. Huh. That's how they determine this thing is so perfect, couldn't exist in nature. And you can have artificial deadlines of the same nature. And so, the one that there's a lot of different elements of them. I kind of try to get a nice acronym like SMART, but I think SMART is really good.
Yeah, that's right.
So I tried different ones like the Chow and the CSI approach. I'll go with the CSI. They should be somewhat challenging. So you don't want to leave motivation on the table. You don't want to make them so easy that you could feel you could do more.
Right.
They have to be specific. People really fall down on specific. They don't know. I really understand how specific it has to be. It's actually activating the limbic system. Limbic system is basically your dog brain, and it responds to what you can smell, touch, taste, hear. And if you have something that is almost like a trigger, and I usually use this example of, 8:30 Saturday morning after breakfast, I will pick up my bag that's already packed by the door so I can leave to make it to the 9 o'clock gym class where I'll see my friend, right? There's a lot of things going on there.
Yep.
A lot of it is specific. If I'm saying an exercise this weekend, that isn't going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And you have to be somewhat immediate. Sometimes some goals have a lot of inertia to it. So you almost want to take your goal and sharpen the point of it down to a pin, like a 10-minute goal, to pop it. And some people say, I can't, this goal is too big. I can't feel like I commit to it. So no, don't commit. Commit to doing 10 minutes of it. Yeah. Then see how you feel. And usually, of course, after you've popped it, if you push through that surface tension, fine.
That's a really good one. I think I want to pause on that one for a second because I've found this to be tremendously helpful in my own life as well. But just the activity and the momentum of that is often enough to overcome sort of the resistance around doing something. And I think it's important to have the idea of not necessarily completing something by a particular time, but at the very least starting it, right? And this comes up in writing all the time. Writers will always say, you got to have the first shitty draft. And that's the only goal, is just to start putting stuff to paper, and the momentum of doing that, you'll actually sort of get eventually towards the goal if you do it enough. But it's the activity more than it is the completion, I think, is important.
Oh, yeah, and I do a lot of writing. Even within that writing, I'd say I have procrastination is an issue that I still have to manage. So it's not like I'm giving up my humanity. I still manage it. But I can recognize, I think, I've been doing actually too much of this, I would say, projects that I can get out of the way within like a couple weeks. And some of the bigger ones still get put aside. And I said, okay, I have to bring out my tool chest again. All right. I recognize this problem. I have to kind of figure out when is my power hours, start kind of breaking it down and using it. And so a lot of the times if it's kind of like physio, a lot of these things, if you do it right, they just go into your subconscious, you get a routine, and then you don't have to worry about them again. But other times you think, oh, no, this is something I have to actually it's posing a challenge. I have to go in my tool chest and think about what to do.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe compare tool chests a little bit. Some of the things that I've found effective and you've found effective.
And that's a great one.
So one of them in particular, the reason we've sort of chatted about GTD before, and I like the getting things done methodology from David Allen, because to me it acts a bit more like a framework. It's a structure that gives me a way to think about and probably more importantly, not think about certain things. So just getting things out of my head and getting them into a system to organize them later is really important for me. And then the other piece that I really like is the Pomodoro technique. So just using a particular set of amount of time and then forced breaks, right? So you can kind of look forward to the little dopamine hits. You can go check social media after you've spent 15 to 25 minutes doing a particular task. Those are two that, and also the chunking activities. So like setting goals or dealing with overwhelm in particular. I do this a lot in exercise and managing staff, is if they feel overwhelmed, let's just talk about all the stuff that you have to do, put it on an Eisenhower matrix and figure out what's urgent, what's important, and start to compartmentalize that focus. And I think people tend to view their to-do list as the be-all and end-all, and they've got 40 things on there, and they feel like, well, I'll never accomplish all of these 40 things. And I tell people, it doesn't matter how much you have to do. You can only do one thing at a time. So take one or two things and just start with those, structure the time, structure the approach, and start knocking a few things off the list. And then that momentum will feed itself and you'll be able to carry on.
Yeah. They start off, there's an infinite amount of work to do. Okay.
Yeah. Always is, right?
Yeah, there always is. There's more work to do than you have time. So let's accept that as a starting place. So really what you're doing is just prioritizing.
Exactly.
Okay. And there's different levels of that. I mean, procrastination, I would say, usually takes the form of you're doing something of lower priority,
right,
when you should be just doing something of higher. That's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. There's some people who call it productive procrastination. I'm
a victim for sure.
Yeah. So you have one thing you really don't want to do, and it drives productivity throughout the rest of your list.
Right. That's a great way to view it.
Well, it's like way students clean their desks the night before exam, right?
Right.
Well, that's not perhaps the best choice. But if you're doing something like Candy Crush instead of what you should be doing, that's a big cost. So really, it's the cost between the different levels of priority. If I should be doing number one and I'm doing number two, maybe it's not that big a difference, right? And but still, okay, we want to do things higher on our list. I like to get things done because there's actually a subset of procrastination, which is called decisional procrastination. And so right up from the back, when Sina asks, get things done, asks, is it actionable? So it says, okay, you've got to just don't leave this lingering on, decide if you're going to do it or not. And then it kind of goes into, what's the next one? Is it a single step? Right? And if it is, and you can do it in 2 minutes, you just get it done, which we like. Mm-hmm. Because we like things that can be done in the short term. And you also don't want to have this cloud hanging over you of all this, what did Covey call it? The thick of thin thing, right? So you can get the stuff away. And if it's not, then you want to break it down to sub-step. That's where goal setting can come in. If they actually kind of developed a little bit more, you impact the planning and develop more talk about motivational goal setting, I think it would actually add to it a little bit more in that particular place. But this is just a science we're continuing developing. So you think about all these systems evolving as we become more sophisticated, and you can upgrade certain sections. I would say planning the project could be, we could bring in elements about making it specific, challenging, but it could go in there. Then, at the end, for example, you get into a specific day and time, right? When, if it's something that you have to do, when do you want to do it? So if we can get that one could be even more specific. But yeah, it has a lot of good elements that we already thought about. So a lot of these things, I say, they're not in conflict with each other. They're just emphasizing different steps. And I like also that it gets into routine. A routine is something that we should strive to do. If you want to make your life hard, try creating everything you want to do and make it unpredictable when you do it.
Right. Yeah.
The routine, same place, same time. They say same bat channel, same bat time, right?
Yeah.
That is a way of you just not deciding to do it. It's like taking the off ramps off the highway. So if you're going down your work productivity highway, once you get started, you continue driving along until there's an off ramp. And some of the ones are, if you get a ringer from the email, that's going to create an off ramp. And if you have a long routine, once you get started, you'll continue that routine and find yourself doing it for several hours without thought. In fact, a lot of professional writers, the way they do it is like from 9 to noon, right? They do it for 3, sometimes longer, but they don't, whatever happens, they always work during that particular time because that's the only way they can manage it. Hemingway used to say about 3 hours or 300 words, which isn't very much, but I guess he really crafted them.
Yeah.
And if he got his words in quickly and he liked them, then he went fishing.
Yeah.
But if if it wasn't coming for him, he never gave himself an out. He said, I have to be there for 3 hours. So,
yeah, and I think that hits on something that I sort of mentioned earlier is how much of this is all just self-discipline, right? Like that seems to be the underlying factor of this, and it's something that I believe in pretty heavily. Like one of my favorite quotes that I've heard probably in recent memory is from Jocko Willink, which is "Discipline equals freedom." Right? And I love the idea of that. Just structuring your life, you're free to do anything you want as long as you maintain the discipline to hold to the things that you feel are important. Right? Then you're free to do whatever you want. Right? And also in management, if you get things done, then people will not harass you. You're free from sort of what people perceive as micromanagement, when really they're just trying to manage you producing outcomes. So if you're accountable to those things, you have discipline around it, then you're free to do what you want, right?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, I find that if I get my stuff done earlier in the day, and I find I really only need to be really concentrative, productive work for about 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm already outstripping almost everybody else. And then sometimes I do more than that. But during the rest of the day, I can pretty much, take it down a notch or two.
Yeah.
And still have done far, far more than most people because I'm tapping into some of that motivation we get just before deadlines. And, we did one study, we found people working at approximately, believe it or not, 12 times their normal pace just before a deadline.
Wow.
I know. It was like they could have 12 of them almost working compared to their regular.
Yeah.
That was the most extreme, but it shows that perhaps if you just could do a few hours of that concentrated work, you would have so much more, and that's much more spare time. And that's where the payoff is. It's
right.
Being able to have dinner with your family, going and getting that exercise routine, just, be here now, right? With whatever you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not new wisdom. I was actually I was even going by to my book, and I have quotes from Marcus Aurelius to John Locke, which also kind of talk about the same type of thing. Not as quite as short as self-discipline equals freedom, but I think it's something we kind of recognize as a species that when you don't have self-discipline, what's driving you, and it's not you.
Yeah,
you are being ridden by vices and external rewards and by situation, and all your personal dreams and aspirations, they're not being pursued. So self-discipline, I think, is being able to live your authentic life.
Yeah. And in order to build that discipline, I think a lot of it requires framework or habits, right? I'm a big fan of BJ Fogg, his work on tiny habits, and just looking for, what are the habits that you already have in your life, and how can you hijack them to create new habits, right?
I know, yeah. I think the starter one I usually recommend people is get to bed.
Yeah, sleep is so important.
It's a foundational one. It's like we have a chronobiologist at our university. Ironically, he's got a basement office without a window.
Not great for his chronometer.
No. He said, I think he was aware of the irony, but he can't get it. But it's there was some research, and I was saying about, if you give teenagers apparently an extra hour to sleep in the morning, you start things later. There's a half grade improvement in the performance. He said, no, it's not right. It's a full grade.
Wow.
Full grade performance. And it's like, it shows you how fundamental, just an extra hour sleep can be to your performance and how much sharper, how much happier. And also people tend to replace sleep with food, for energy because they're tired. They use the quick energy from that. It's everything comes better. So, and that starts with a routine. And the routine is, right, you've got to start putting away things that you find engaging before your bedtime, right? Which is usually your phone and usually all the, the Blu-ray, the blue light. And you have to have this kind of calm down period, and you should try and go to bed at the same time every night until you get in the habit of it. And good advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do the opposite.
Yeah, and to I think how that influences procrastination as well is that decision fatigue, right? Like if you're tired and you've not eaten well and you're too tired to exercise and
it all goes
everything
down
becomes it's sort of a self-perpetuating spiral, right?
Yeah, number one reason people say for putting stuff off is they're too tired.
Right.
And then the other half of it, I think, is also underappreciated. And we're starting with the easy stuff. This is stuff that anyone can do, right? And it's all good stuff. Is what are you doing with your power hours? Mm-hmm. So when do you have the most energy during the day? And it's a 4 or 5 hour shift. And some people are a little bit earlier and they're called morning lark. Some people are later and they're called evening owls. And it has to do with your chronobiology again. Mm-hmm. But whenever it is, what are you doing with it? Are you doing it your most productive, your most valuable work? If so, that's great. That's the lesson for a great life. If you're doing it with just mindless email and you're putting it off, and then around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're getting to what you think you really should be doing, and that's when your circadian rhythm slumps at the worst, and you find yourself difficultly going for it. Well, it was almost inevitable by you trying to start it during that time. In fact, hard projects should be started when you have the most energy. Yep. And the hardest thing is the first step, and that happens in the morning.
Yeah, I'm a fan of scheduling the important things as standing meetings for myself at those times that I know that I'm most productive for writing or any strategic thinking. All that stuff is scheduled in my calendar as a regular meeting with myself to capitalize on that time, right? Yeah.
Do you try the unschedule?
Unschedule, nope.
Oh yeah, this is like Neil Frior's work. It's where they also schedule in. Some people say, "Well, I don't have enough time for myself."
Right. Yep.
And so it's okay. Well, great. Let's schedule that in first. What do you need? What do you need to be okay with this? Well, I want to have go and have my Sundays off. Okay, great. And what do you want during the week? Well, I want to be able to exercise Tuesday. Okay, and we'll schedule in all those moments that you need to feel okay with it. Yeah. And what you find mostly is that before that, I got to be out of here by 5. Right? You get a nice pop in productivity through constraining your time. Yeah. By only giving yourself so much time to do on a project. Usually people give themselves too much time. And there's no urgency, there's no sense of immediacy to it, and they're doubling or tripling the amount of actual effort they have to put towards it.
Yeah, I definitely unschedule time. I have several blocks and sometimes entire days that I block off just to sort of give my brain rest and take time for myself or spend time with the family. I think that's definitely important and is a matter of prioritization of your schedule, right?
Yeah, and I think of that as parenting myself.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, if you're an outside person, if you're outside manager managing yourself and somebody who cares about, let's say, you yourself as your own employee, saying, well, I want to make this person, they get this time off. This is when they should work. Mm-hmm. And that should be kind of your mental context. And then you kind of go through it. And that's a much better system than just doing what you feel.
Right. Yeah. As we've talked about, we're kind of a terrible judge of that most of the time.
We're terrible at that. I mean, acknowledge it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you a bad person. Trust me. It just makes you human. Yeah. So, and so there's a lot of these things that you can do. Some people don't have to do all of them. I find that for some people, there's like 2 or 3 things, and it makes a big difference in their life. They were just so close to actually tipping it from choosing A versus choosing B, choosing work versus play. And we could talk about how, again, the work environment is really poorly designed.
Right.
It is to have, let's say, a medium which is simultaneously a casino, a strip club, and a movie theater. Also, you do work there too. What could go wrong with this design?
Yeah, absolutely. No distractions at all.
No distractions at all. It's like, really? This is it's crazy. But you begin to realize that the world isn't designed for us. We're designed to be consumers. it's not designed to help us live our dreams. It's designed to help other people make money off us. And most operating systems, computer systems, everything is along these lines. It's all about seeing how they can increase our consumption, regardless of whether we had something more important to do. It's not there to enable us. It's there to distract us. So it is kind of difficult. I mean, people, for example, I like playing games, right? You used to be able to do a board game, right? And you play a board game and be fun, and that'd be done. Now, there's these games I can play against other people on my phone. I'll do that. And all of a sudden it's reminders and say, hey, do you want to play another game? And it's like,
your clan needs you. Log in now.
Your clan needs you. Come on. That's right. It's like, wow, I got to do it for my clan. And then it's like, you didn't play today. You don't get the treasure box or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
So, these choices, these steps, we've just deconstructed them. I mean, the amount of science that goes into creating temptation is impressive.
Yeah.
I go around with it saying, gee, these people know more about our flaws in our operating system than and I'm an expert in this. And they've lovingly coaxed each and every one of them to the maximum extent. So the strange thing, the more technology develops, the less rational we become as a species, because the better the technology is of finding these operating system flaws. And the more important it becomes for people to learn how to defend themselves. I would like to think that we're in just this period of our civilization, which is temporary, and then maybe, my grandkids will be living in something that's designed at a level to help them get stuff done rather than designed just to have them consume. But, you've got to take the good and the bad with free market capitalism.
That's right.
This ain't the good part, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, what about helping other people? Like we've kind of talked about the self. I do a lot of work with executives and team leaders and managers and things like that. And I think they see the effects in a lack of productivity or sort of a lack of motivation, what they would maybe describe it, usually sometimes described as a lack of accountability. And I think a lot of that is born out of people's procrastination and motivation. Sometimes sort of missing the note on how they're reflected in the goals that other people are setting for them and determining their own motivation towards those. So what would you recommend to people in supporting other people for their motivation and procrastination issues? Oh, yeah, there's a lot of ones. I mean, if we're focusing on the workplace, try and have your meetings in the afternoon, not during less productive hours. Don't really hang on, because wouldn't it make sense, like the cognitive power, to be really engaged in a meeting? Because I've always thought you should have the meetings earlier, not in the afternoon, because you get the 1 p.m. slump and everyone kind of checks out. Well, I would say, well, then let's classify. If it's not a priority meeting, have it in the afternoon. Okay, I see. Yep. The other one would be that there's a lot of organizations which have a culture of if somebody gave you an email, you have to respond to it, and the amount of productivity that is destroying by having people always attend to their email, I think is just absolutely unfathomable. Yeah. My favorite is the email courier. Someone sends you an email and then walks into your office, say, hey, do you read that email I just sent you? That's right. Or another email. I sent you an email half an hour ago. Why aren't you responding? It's like, well, okay, you've chosen, because people themselves, they love immediacy. Right. So they love asking something. So that's they want an instant response. But by indulging in that, that's a luxury good. You just destroyed, I think people say, about 2 months of productivity a year. That I've seen 1 to 2 months. By forcing people to attend to their email and respond to them quickly. You're talking about a sixth of salary for that one indulgence, which is, you must really love it because you're willing to pay through the nose for it. Right. The other one is when people start new projects. You can do it used to be management by objectives. So helping people craft those goals, saying, okay, here's the goal. Well, how are you going to start on it? When are you going to start? And, okay, so when is your first deliverable? Okay, why don't you come back and talk to me about this at this particular moment? And you really, them talking to you about it, you don't even, it's really not that important. They just had to have that deadline and just to talk. And all you're there is basically saying, great, you're making progress. That was pretty much the only thing you had to do during that initial meeting. So it's very, very easy. And it's like, give me a 2-minute check-in. Come by my office and say how it's going at this particular time. This is golden. So people have to pick up on this as one of my primary recommendations for managing people is assign the reporting, not the deliverable, right? Because then they that, like you said, it constrains their time. They're more likely to start on something if they have to report to you about it on Thursday versus 2 weeks from now, I want this done.
That's right. Yeah.
Their attentiveness to starting on the activity is going to be very, very different if you assign reporting early.
That's right. And again, it don't make it. Doesn't have to be onerous. It can be just give me a 2-minute report.
Right.
So you can think also in terms of distractions. Do you have? Is there a lot of people, for example, they'll have the IT be able to block certain websites from them, and some people do appreciate that. Mm-hmm. So give people the option, or at least the capacity, to block their temptations from where they are. Some people don't like it because it gets too paternalistic. Mm-hmm. But most people like that you have some way of doing it. And I know a lot of, for example, again, professional writers who have blocked their access to the internet in some really severe way. I mean, even going out and getting their MacBook modem blown out. So it's basically a typewriter because they can't get trusted with it. Right. Yeah. But what are they doing? They're very productive people, and they do that by recognizing their vulnerability. They recognize that they're human, say, I'm human, I can't have this around. I'm going to do something about it. And then again, it starts with that. It starts with acknowledging our own humanity, forgiving ourselves for it, and then doing something.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we're just at about an hour. So I think I would love to chat with you more on this. If you're willing to come back and chat further, I'd be happy to have you, but we'll wrap up. I really appreciate you've been spending some time and chatting on not just procrastination, but the general psychology that we deal with and where some of this stems from. So I really appreciate your input on this, Piers.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I guess I do have more than an hour to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to do it again.
Yeah, no, as I said, the intention was procrastination, and we just got into so many other areas of psychology that relate to it that it's really fascinating. So awesome stuff. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks, Piers.
Okay, bye-bye.